All right, Robin, take the floor. 3 steps to take back control of your life.
So it's interesting. When we feel out of control, our stress levels go up. Stress, anxiety, overwhelm, frustration, fear, maybe, right? Any of those types of things go up. And what's interesting about when our stress levels go up is stress and confidence are kind of on a seesaw. And when our stress goes up, our confidence naturally comes down. When our confidence goes up, our stress naturally comes down. So it's kind of interesting when you think about it. When we talk about how do we manage our stress better, for example, because when we're out of control or feel out of control, we're going to feel stressed. Naturally, when we feel more in control, we're going to feel more confident. So this seesaw is constantly moving up and down. And a lot of attention gets given to how do I manage the stress? How do I bring the stress down? How do I de-stress? And one of the things that we want to share with you in our time together today is not just how to bring the stress down, but how to bring the confidence up. Because oftentimes there are things we can do that boost the confidence in the moment that make the stress naturally go down or even go away. And so we're going to touch on both of those sides of that equation. And the reason that we talked about, or we call it 3 ways to regain control, is because when we're in control and things are fine, we don't need tips and tools. We don't need to know other things. We're okay, right? It's when things go out of whack for some reason, whether it's other people or our environment, right? All of the things we can't control. When we focus on those things, we feel out of control, which is kind of strange to think about. Because if we think about most of the things that cause our stress or cause us to feel out of control, it's other people, situations, environments, right? The traffic, the weather, right? The stock market, all of these things that how much control do we have over any of those things? 0. But those are the things that often pull our focus. Would you agree with that? Is that something that you find is true? Yeah. It's amazing when we stop to just become aware of how much of what we focus on, we have 0 control over. And that's where most of our stress comes from. So the first thing we're going to talk about getting more in control has to do with just awareness. Because when we start to focus, we can choose what to focus on at any given time. And we go where our attention goes. So if you think about it, if we're thinking of the stress or focusing on the frustration or what we have no control over, that's where we're going to go, because we're going to have those thoughts. Those thoughts are going to create feelings, and those feelings are going to create behaviors, right? And so we want to start by talking about awareness of thoughts, because the interesting thing is I can't control other people. I can't control other places. I can't always control the environment. I can't always control the situation. What's the one thing I can control at any given time? Me. That is it. That's literally it. And it's interesting how that's not our autopilot or our default. We often focus on things outside of us instead of focusing on what we can do about it. So life's not about what's happening to you, because you can't really control a lot of that. Life's all about how you're choosing to respond to what's happening to you, because you've got total control over that. So the first thing that we're really going to dive into is this idea of self-talk. It's amazing. Young, older, male, female, entry-level sales kids, CEO, every human being has that self-talk voice. And is that voice usually kind or critical? It's usually reminding us what's going wrong, what we don't do well, what's probably going to happen, that it's not going to be good. It's always kind of poking the bear, so to speak, right? And if that negative self-talk gets a little too strong, which is very common, it's easy to do, it can almost be like there's a bully in our own head sometimes. And the reason that's important to know is, one, it's very normal. Our self-talk is trying to help. It's a really bad communicator, but it's trying to make sure we know, don't do this. That's not going to go well. Hey, you better do this better. But it's really bad at communicating those things. So the reason we're talking about self-talk right off the bat is I can't control everything else that I think might be bringing me stress. But if you think about it, how much stress do we actually create ourselves by reacting to things outside of us? I'd never say 100% because that's not realistic, right? There are difficult, challenging situations and people and conversations, absolutely. But if we create a great deal of our own stress, the beauty of that, of course, is what? Who has total control over changing that? Me. So what we want to do is we want to start to kind of give you some ways to think about that conversation that's happening in our own heads all the time, constantly. And some little shifts can make a huge impact on feeling out of control versus feeling in control, feeling stressed versus feeling pretty confident, no matter what's going on. Because I can get pulled into the chaos, or I can pull others into my calm. Those are both choices, but I got to know how to do that. That's a skill.
And I want to highlight the idea that we get stuck in this mentality when we are trying to shift self-talk that it needs, like, we're in here and we have to be way over here. Like, instead of saying I'm ugly, we're supposed to be saying I'm beautiful, I'm God made, we go to this like other extreme where our brain, it doesn't connect. It doesn't even believe it in the slightest. So one of Robin and I's suggestions on this is to, when we think about a comment that is negative that we say to ourselves, what is the next gentle progression of something that is believable, that your brain can wrap itself around and go, okay, I could see that. And maybe it's, well, my fingernails are pretty, or I like my hair. Like, it's kind of taking something that we can shift out of, instead of saying I'm ugly to I'm supposed to be able to say I'm beautiful. Okay. So this would be very individualized to everybody, and what your comments are that are coming to you. It could actually be a good exercise, a creative exercise to do and go, what just flows out of my mouth? And then what are the next gentle steps that are believable to me that I could be saying? So sometimes it's about us physically, but also it can be about how we view ourselves as, I don't know if the lazy one got put in there, but I feel like people view themselves as I am a lazy person, or I am stupid. That is me as a person. I am, instead of us having moments in our day, in our life where yes, we can be that in a moment, but that's not like us as a person.
And all of these things, isn't it amazing? I mean, when you start to think about it, they all just kind of come out. We're like, oh yeah, here are things we say all the time, or hear people say all the time. And the interesting thing is, some of these things we think, and some of these things we say. So like if I had my water bottle here and I was talking and I went like this and I knocked my water bottle over and it spilled, I might actually go, oh my God, you're such a klutz. You're so stupid. Oh, I'm so embarrassed, right? The reality is nobody cares. Pick your water bottle up and keep talking. It's not a big deal, right? But with negative self-talk, the moment we have that thought, Lindsay, to what you started to talk about, do we believe what we're saying, or are we just saying it because it's autopilot? Or sometimes we're saying it because someone said it to us 20 years ago once, and we've said it to ourselves the last 20 years. Amen. And now it's kind of part of our belief system. Or maybe we've been told that by a person who was unbelievably insecure about themselves and they were projecting, and I just happened to be the target, and they spent years telling me one thing, but it's actually not true. It never was. But I believed it. No judgment, just awareness. That happens. Those things happen to all of us. What we want you to sort of shift is this idea of, when we talk to ourselves in our own head, we're in total control. Because one, most of what we're saying up there, most of the script in our head is created by ourselves. wow, we're mean to ourselves. We are not really nice to ourselves. Isn't it fascinating when you think about how much nicer to everyone else we are than we are to ourselves? It's kind of strange when you think about that. And so one of the things that we would encourage you to start doing, and again, this might be things that you can use and apply, because you can start doing this immediately. Or if you know anybody who really struggles with the negative self-talk, that really hits their self-esteem, their self-confidence, their self-worth, these are things you can share with them. And there are a couple of tools, a couple of tricks to really start to either validate or invalidate what you're thinking in your head when it comes to that self-talk. Because the reality is some of it's true and some of it is not. Right? So because we know how to help everybody else, but we don't know how to help ourselves sometimes, one of the greatest ways to start shifting negative self-talk, two things. I'm going to give you two things. One, start talking to yourself like you'd talk to a friend. And think about this. Let's say I was in a situation where I was just beating myself up. I was completely down on myself, going, oh my goodness, I have to go do X. I'm no good at this. Every time I try this, I fail. It's going to not work again. I'm just, I don't think I'm ever going to get it. And that's how we think to ourselves or talk to ourselves. But if a friend came over and said those exact same words, would you say to them, yeah, you're going to fail. You always do. You're really bad at this. Would you ever say that? You got this. Why do you keep saying that? You know what? You've never failed on that diet. That diet's failed you. You know what? You've never failed on that thing. That thing failed you. We're going to find you the thing that actually works. You know what? How about I do it with you? Right? What are you going to do differently? You got this. We would encourage them. We would support them. Right? We would never talk to someone else the way we talk to ourselves. So begin to talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend. It's a really quick and easy way to manage this conversation in your head and really begin to give yourself the other side of the story. And what I mean by that is when we default to negative self-talk, which again is very common, when we default to negative self-talk, we're giving ourselves only half the story. And I'll use a couple of analogies to tell you exactly how we do that with so many things. If you're listening to a weather forecast, right? And I know you're in Florida, so this may not apply completely. I'm in Cleveland. So the first things that come to my mind are, a weather forecaster might say it's partly cloudy. It's going to be partly cloudy today. Well, if it's partly cloudy, what does that also mean it has to be? It's got to be partly sunny. Partly cloudy and partly sunny are exactly the same thing. They can't exist without the other. But why do we just say partly cloudy? We often give ourselves what could go wrong, what the negative part, what we don't want, and we get stuck there. So giving yourself the whole story means, yes, something today might be partly cloudy, but let me also remind myself of what's partly sunny. Right? This is going to be difficult, but you know what? By 2:00, it's going to be over and we're going to be on doing other fun things, right? Or I have this meeting tomorrow or this conversation, but once I have it, even though it's going to be challenging, it's going to fix this problem. So there's another side to it, right? So start thinking about and even catch other people when they're really focused on the partly cloudy in the situation or in life, whatever's going on. Yes, acknowledge that because it's real. I'm not saying be Pollyanna about everything and everything's fine. Please don't do that either. But when you find someone or yourself focused on only what's going wrong or what might go wrong, take a moment, do yourself a favor, and give yourself the other side of the story. What could also go right? Right? So give yourself the full story. Manage this conversation in your head. If the script that's up there right now is not working for you, rewrite the script. It's completely in your control to do that. So talk to yourself like you'd talk to a friend. The other way that you can shift self-talk pretty quickly is that negative self-talk voice. Give that self-talk voice a name. the negative one. And I would say, don't name it someone you know or something like that. That's easy to do. So let's say I decide I'm going to name my negative self-talk voice Joan. Now, Joan's going to pop up and be chattering in my head, right? She's always there. She's going to show up. That's all right. I know that. That's my expectation. But when Joan shows up now, I'm going to realize that that's Joan. And I'm going to be able to go, there she is. Okay, Joan, I'm busy right now. Don't need to talk about this. I'm going to go do this and we'll talk about this later. Or Joan, I don't agree with you. Or Joan, you know what? You're right, but we're working on that. So we don't need to talk about it right now. Or Joan, just shut it. Just go sit in the corner and can it, right? Because nothing you say is real. Whatever degree you need to talk to Joan about, the idea is if you name that negative self-talk voice, it starts to separate that voice from your voice. And now it's not all you. You've got two distinct voices. And for a lot of people, talking back to that voice sometimes is the very first time they've ever stuck up for themselves in their own head. They're not just believing everything they think, because it's easy to believe everything we think. But the reality is a lot of stuff we think isn't real. It's not true. It's completely made up. Or again, it came from someone else because they're having a challenge and they're just projecting it. And I happen to be the one that they're putting it all on. It literally has nothing to do with me, but it might make me feel less than. So if I start to recognize that negative self-talk as something else, and I can agree with it, disagree with it, tell it, I'm not listening, I'm done, we don't need to talk about this. We've talked about this already. It's solved. Go do something else. You're wasting my time. All of a sudden, that stress comes down and that confidence goes up because now I'm back in control. So negative self-talk, again, that awareness that we create a great deal of our own stress because of how we were thinking or choosing to react or respond to things. It's something we can gain more control of. And again, even if I'm creating 50% of my own stress by doing that, by doing these couple of things and honing those as skills, what if you cut your stress in half right now, like that? Would that be amazing? Mm. So I'm not going to worry about the 50% that stresses me that I can't control. I can't control that. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to ditch the 50% that I'm helping to create because I'm in total control of that. So a couple of tools to throw in the toolbox: talk to yourself like you would talk to a friend, and name that negative self-talk voice, and make sure you're validating or invalidating things it's saying. Don't just believe everything you think.
Yes, Robin, I'm loving this. And I'm going to add a number 3 onto our list here. One of the things, and you had already mentioned this word, the word is projecting, that a lot of us do a lot of projecting by accident. There is no conscious level of this typically when we're doing it, that we project a feeling that we're having onto somebody else. So it becomes really important. And it's like a gentle way to start to change the self-talk is when you find yourself judging somebody else's behaviors or actions, to start to come at it more from an observational standpoint. So like if you hear yourself going, I can't believe they're eating that, there's like a chance that that is because if you were eating that, you'd be a little shocked you're eating that. And so what you're doing is going, okay, if I'm not saying that, then when I see somebody eating something or eating fast or eating, how can we just come at it like a more of a, interesting that was their choice today. You can feel that was like a really gentle, subtle change. But if you practice that throughout your whole day, I can't believe they're wearing that. Okay, instead of saying that, then it's that's interesting that they chose that it's shorts today when it's 40 degrees. We're gently shifting how we're projecting onto others. And what happens is it accidentally comes back more gentle to you next time. You're going to start to feel your own judgments come back more observational. Awareness is the word that Robin started with, which is what we're ultimately seeking. But and I love when things can happen without having to put so much stinking, effort into it. And this is one of those. This is if we just kind of stick with it, if we keep shifting our judgments, it will come back in a positive light for us, which is my last little point with this too. We are going to have moments where, man, I'm working on positive self-talk and I'm catching myself all the time reverting right back. You're going to have that. It's not going to change overnight. It's not going to be fast like that. Like what's going to happen realistically is you're working on it. And then one day you go, I reacted to that differently. Like, cool. That wouldn't have been my reaction 2 months ago. And again, back to that word subtle, you're going to catch it in subtle ways. And then you have to really be aware when that thought is different so that you can capture it and go, I'm changing. This is changing for me. And then we rinse and repeat. We just keep working through this whole process of awareness and projecting and all of that to where one day it just feels different, but sometimes it's years, and that's the hard part for us to really grasp is that I don't want it to take years, but if we put the effort and the work in, then when you have changed, you have really changed. It is not a quick fix. Did you have anything else to add on to the self-talk?
Lindsay, just a couple of things you just said I thought were great. That word gentle shifts. I love that word because whether we're critical of ourselves or critical of others, it's rarely gentle. That's not the first word I would ever come up with, which is why when you said that, I was like, ooh, love that. Give yourself permission to just observe. Because I can observe, and this is something hard for me that I'm still working on. And it's something I think very normal, which is I don't have to have an opinion about everything. I don't. And when I gave myself permission to just not have an opinion about everything, I realized how many opinions about everything I had constantly. And it was like, what does any of that have to do with me? And so one of my mantras to really just kind of teach myself to just stop that, because that's exhausting. Having opinions about everything is exhausting after a while, right? And when you stop and realize most of the things I have opinions about have nothing to do with me. And so a mantra that I adapted when something starts to catch my attention, and it's not harmful to anybody. It's not right. Obviously, if it's harmful to someone, you got to jump in or have an opinion about it. But, when I started just stepping back and using the mantra, this has nothing to do with me, all of a sudden I realized how much less stressful words were, people's opinions or thoughts were. They didn't hold any weight because it doesn't have to do with me. When something is hurtful, stop and check who said it, because chances are that tells you more about them than it does about you. And so there's always a reason people behave the way they do. There's always a reason people say the things they do. And 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with you, even if you're the target in that moment. So remind yourself it has nothing to do with you, and gently remind yourself, I don't have to have an opinion about everything. And you'll be amazed at what you can sit back calmly and just watch and observe. So I love that, Lindsay. So enough with negative self-talk. So let's switch over to the other side of that. Because again, this idea of negative self-talk that causes stress for ourselves, it's not about going all the way to the other side and, again, being Pollyanna about everything and everything's wonderful and fine, because that's not realistic, right? That's being overly optimistic is just as wrong as being overly pessimistic, right? Those two extremes, nothing is always completely going wrong. Everything is not always completely going right. The answer lies in this middle here. And if you're able to kind of get in the middle and shift, keeping yourself a little closer to what's going right or the positive, it bodes well for just being happy and calm and being able to be there for yourself and for other people. When we talk about positive self-talk, even if it's some of the opposites of the negative self-talk we thought of, when somebody is talking kindly to themselves, and kindly made our initial list too, right? How do we be more kind, right? To ourselves, to others? What are words that come to mind when we're being kind to ourselves or other people? Notice that so many of these things start with I am. And again, you know what? It's amazing when you stop and think, I can say things that I am, and it brings my stress up. I'm stupid. I'm a klutz. I don't look good. We can also pull our confidence up by also giving us I am statements. I am strong. I'm good. I'm good enough. I've got this. I'll figure this out, right? I'm not where I want to be yet, right? Sometimes adding those words, right? I'm good enough. Wow, that changes it, right? I'm not there yet. Even things that I'm thinking, whoa, I don't know that I'm okay with that or good or I'm there. Just adding those things of, well, not at this moment, but I'm working towards it, right? And because I am smart, I am good, I do have this, I am kind, I am strong, I'm important, I'm courageous, I'm taking action. Because of all those I ams, I'll get wherever I want to go. And the more that I'm reminding myself of the things I am in those ways, the less people who might say things that counter that matter. Because notice the other things that made this list, right? Not my problem. I don't care, right? Not my circus, not my monkeys. It's fascinating to stop and think what positive self-talk those things are, because just like I don't have to believe every thought I have, because some of them are lying to me, some of them are completely made up, right? I don't have to believe them. Same thing. I don't have to care about every single thing. I don't have to have an opinion about every single thing, because a lot of those things take all my energy, that if I simply kept that energy, I'd have a lot more energy to do all these things that I am doing or wanting to do. So protect your energy. Don't give it away. We often, and I'll say this, as women, we often give our energy away because we do want to take care of everybody. That's a component that we fall into that sometimes. And it's a wonderful thing to be caring and want to take care of everyone. But the reality is, make sure you're on that list of people you're taking care of. Don't put yourself at the bottom and then never get to you. You've got to do for you. And of course, there's that old analogy. If you're on an airplane and the oxygen masks fall and they tell you, put yours on first. The reason they tell you to do that is because if I don't take care of me, but I run around to help everyone else, I'm going to pass out. And not only am I not of help to anyone I want to help, but now they have to stop doing what they're doing to come help me. It accomplishes the opposite of what I want. If I take a moment and literally take a moment and put my mask on, I can help everyone else on that plane. But if I don't take my oxygen first, I'm not going to be the help that I really would love to be. So when you take care of yourself first, you can take care of everyone else even better, which is an amazing thing. It's often the opposite of what we find ourselves doing. So the summation of all of this, as you're shifting from more negative self-talk to this positive self-talk, remind yourself, yep, this might not be good, but here's what's happening that is good. You're taking your oxygen first. Do for you. It is not selfish. Do for you, and you can help others so much more. So don't leave yourself out of the mix of people you're trying to people please with. Keep yourself in that mix at all times. And again, it will take that shift, and that confidence will just kick up, which again will naturally bring that stress back down.
This is a really good point to interject here. Why do I not do what I know I should do? Mm-hmm. And this is actually one of the big barriers that comes up, is that we are not pouring into ourselves. We're not putting that oxygen mask on ourselves first. So more barriers come up to do the things that we know we should do. Whether that's we're too exhausted at the end of the day, we have forever bumped everybody up on that priority list before we ever make it. We'll never make it up to the top because we'll always keep putting somebody else. I want you to really think through, like, what are my barriers? What are the things that come out of my mouth that I say, I know I want to. I know I want to fit in more walks in the week. I know that I want to do more meal planning. I know that I want to cook more in the kitchen and less eating out. Like, what is just constantly flowing out of your mouth? And then you're constantly also saying, it's not happening. Why is this not happening for me? And then take everything that Robin just talked about and go, could it be that I'm not giving myself permission? I'm not allowing myself to exist at the top of my priority list because of whatever. It can be because of guilt. It can be because maybe we need better time management. It's all these layers, and we're just kind of uncovering a big layer with the negative self-talk that leads to awareness, that leads to the idea that we can't pour from an empty cup. We have to take care of ourselves first. Just really think through those barriers. What is it? And could it be that you're not putting yourself at the top of your priority list?
And you know what, along with that, Lindsay, we can take a moment and talk about things like non-negotiables and boundaries. Setting expectations, not only for other people, but also for yourselves, is so key. And a lot of times people throw around the word boundaries these days, and some people get what that means, and some people don't. Some people throw out boundaries for everything, right? But what we're talking about with boundaries, and I prefer the term non-negotiables, there are things in your life that you are allowed to decide, I do this or I do not do this. And no matter what comes at you, you've already made that decision. So I don't have to have decision fatigue and think about it in the moment. And this could be all kinds of things. It could be maybe you've decided to make, for example, a health shift of some kind, right? And you're someone, hey, I don't do this anymore. I used to be a big whatever eater, right? Drinker of something, whatever it is. I don't do that anymore. Now this is what I do. And so when somebody offers you that food, for example, you say, no, thank you. And you look for something else. You don't have to think in the moment or go, well, should I? Right? There's the old should. That made the first list too, right? Should I do that now? Should I not? You don't have to think. So when you make decisions ahead of time, I know a lot of people do this with topics of conversation. I have a very good friend who, just has a bunch of friends who love political discussion. And he said, look, I don't care what everybody thinks or believes, what side you're on. None of that matters to me. I do not talk about politics. I don't. So when you're with me, please just don't ever invite me into a discussion. That's all. I have no other judgment, no other anything. I don't care. I'm not taking sides. I just do not talk about it. That's a non-negotiable that he has. And so again, if there are any areas in your life that do cause stress or create anxiety, overwhelm, suck your energy out of your life, think about some of those things and think, are there some non-negotiables or some decisions about these things I can already make so that I don't even get into these things in the first place, or I've already made a decision. So when the moment comes up, I can just go, oh, no, thank you. Or yes, I'd love that. Or do you have this? So think about boundaries and non-negotiables. It alleviates decision fatigue. Because now half the decisions you make every day, we don't even realize we always come to the same answer or the same conclusion. But we think about my husband, who's a big bacon double cheeseburger guy. Every restaurant, he sits there and looks at the menu and my daughter and I look at each other like he's going to order anything else, right? But he spends 5 minutes looking at the menu. And then the waiter comes over and he's like, I'll have a bacon double cheeseburger. And of course we lose it because I could have told you that 5 minutes ago. Right? You don't need to think anymore. So find areas in your life that are kind of, you already know, and you know what you're going to say, you know what you're going to decide, and just give yourself permission to just do it and not waste the time and energy trying to get involved in it and think it's going to be different. It's not, and that's okay. That's okay. And what are your thoughts, Lindsay?
I had a friend, and this is my example, who she is just one of those people that probably says too many accidental yeses, and she's just a giver and blah, blah. And she took 1 year and she called it her year of no. And so she knew right away that no matter what anybody was asking of her, she could giggle through and say, it's my year of no, if you would have asked last year. And it was done. So like it was a soccer manager request. I'm sorry, it's my year of no. It was a PTO. And it's not because she's never given or she's rude or whatever. It gave her like the coolest, nicest out. And people were like, no problem. And I think that's what we need more of. We need to be able to like quickly have a response that we can feel it sits well with our soul, so we don't walk away feeling guilty.
Think in terms of, again, always start with you. Start in your head. What's going on with you? Know that there's always a reason other people are behaving the way they are. There's always a reason. And 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with you, right? There's always a reason I'm behaving the way I am. And 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with the people that I might be bringing into the mix or frustrating or whatever too, right? So with this self-talk piece, kind of to wrap all of that up, and even with the boundaries and non-negotiables, you're allowed to kind of be an island sometimes. Give yourself permission to kind of be a silo. And when things don't fit, you don't need to be part of it. When things don't fit for you, you don't need to invite them in or accept them. I love that on the positive self-talk list, no was one of the positive self-talk things, right? Mm-hmm. One of the greatest things in the world you can do for yourself is say no to things. And Lindsay, I loved your example of the person who they had a built-in non-negotiable. It's my year of no. You can't argue with that. You can't do anything else. It's already decided. You got no comeback. If you also make it about the other person sometimes when you're setting a boundary, you kind of trick them, but you make them, for example, let's say I'm asked to be on the board of directors for something. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't care. Right. But I don't want to let someone down, or they expect it, or, they asked me. All those things come into play. I'm going to feel uncomfortable saying, I don't have time. I'm so sorry. I really don't care. Right. We might not be comfortable saying that, but I can make it about them. Oh my goodness. Thank you for thinking of me. You know what? With what I have going on right now, I couldn't give that the time that it deserves. And I wouldn't want to do that to you. Thank you for asking. Maybe I can help you find someone for that. I just made it about them. How can they come back when I said I couldn't give it the time it deserves? So that's why I have to say no, because I wouldn't do that to you. If you make it about them, they will never cross your boundaries. So it's a little shift in the communication too for that, which is kind of interesting. But all of that, again, just keep in mind, you're in more control than you probably tell yourself. We all are. And hopefully there are some ways to do that. And Lindsay, I want to toss it back to you because, how do you make those things habit? How do you make them, once you apply them to your life, how do you make them just how you start showing up, where I don't have to think about this stuff anymore? And I'd love for you to talk a little about just neuroplasticity and even how our brains work when it comes to habits.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I feel like this was game changer for me when I really took the time to understand. And I think a lot of us hear this word neuroplasticity, or that our brain has the ability to shift and change, but we don't really understand how to relate that to our life. And I am definitely one of those people, I need examples. I need to know exactly, if I want to change food, how does neuroplasticity help me? If I want to change my movement, if I want to change my relationship with somebody, why does this word mean something to me? So I'm going to break the word down for us for a minute and then give you some really specific examples of how I think that you can tangibly take this away today and use it for your better. So that word neuroplasticity is actually a mashup of 2 different words: neural, which is relating to our nervous system, and plasticity is the capacity to adapt or to change. Okay. So plasticity is the kind of really cool part about this. It's not rigid. It's not set in stone. It is ever moving. So when we think about neuroplasticity, it's a mechanism by which the brain encodes experience and new behaviors. So when I say encodes, when we experience something, our brain takes that and it's going to either say, it's going to dig it deeper into our set, into our way of in which we do things, or we let it go if we don't continue to do it. So let me give you an example with this. So if let's say we're trying to shift our alcohol behavior at night, if you're kind of an every night once a glass of wine, and you're going, I probably shouldn't do this every night, but you've been doing it every night. What's been happening with that encoding is that every time you have the glass of wine, you set the code a little more firmly. Or I like to talk about it almost more in pathways, that if we have a really well carved out path that you've already gone through, you've mowed, you've gone over it 1,000 times, and it is cleared away, it's the easiest path that you could ever think to walk because there's nothing in your way of walking it. That is where something has been really encoded. You've done it over and over again, and it's just super easy for you to do it again. Where you think of the other path, where it's the trees have grown in and there's vines and you can't even take 2 steps without having to take your machete and clear things away. And you take that path the first time and it's hard. But if you come back to that path again, it's not easy still, but now you've already done a little bit of the hard work. You've already cleared it away. So let's keep with that same example of having that glass of wine at night. That first time that you kind of make yourself not do it, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't, like, you might get the woohoo the next morning, I'm glad I did that. But in the process, it wasn't easy. It wasn't innate. There was nothing that came. Or maybe for somebody else, it's that first time that they walk in through the gym doors and it didn't feel good. You're sore the next day. You're like, why the heck would I want to go back to that? So what happened though, is you already took your machete through your forest here and you cleared a little bit of the path. And then the next time that you show up to it, it's a little easier. You clear a little bit more. And your other path starts to grow some weeds and it starts to become a little more overgrown. And so that other path isn't as easy. You're taking your situation and you're encoding a different message to your brain that says, I could maybe like this. This could maybe become a little bit more easy. And so why I care about you understanding this, I have like 2 big takeaways from it. One is the belief system that I can change. If you have ever heard yourself say, I'm just this person, I just don't work out, I just don't eat that way, I just could never see myself as a vegetarian. Like anytime that you hear this, like hardcore, it's just not me, I just don't. It's actually not true. It's not scientifically true. It might be very true in your brain at the moment, but science tells us otherwise. Science through neuroplasticity tells us we are very capable of change. Is it easy? No, right? So when I'm talking these pathways, I want you to picture it's 1,000 times of practicing something that you actually want it to become easier. And are most of us willing to put up with that? Not really, because that's a long time to have to hang in there. It's a long time to have to like have faith that that change is coming. And so that's where I think if we can truly believe that the change can happen, that's a huge first step, the belief of it. Because if I know I can do something, but I just can't do it yet, I'm willing to keep working at it. When I want to jump ship, when I want to bail is when I'm like, I don't know if it's working. I'm kind of showing up to it every day and somebody's telling me it's going to work, but I don't know. And so I guess I just want to put this belief system in all of your heads today that you are capable of change. Even if it has not been you your entire life, my promise to you is that your brain is capable of accepting this change. Okay. And then that part 2 of this, besides the belief of I can change, is that every time we hit that moment and we go, does it matter? I come to my kitchen and I could leave the glass of wine, but I'm like, does it really matter tonight if I have the glass of wine while I cook? I can like gently tell myself all the reasons why it doesn't matter and it's such a pleasurable thing to do. Does it really matter if I go to the gym today? Does it really matter if I go to bed on time tonight and I don't scroll through my phone? Like kind of keep going through all those shifts and changes. It matters. And this is why it matters, is because the second that you do the behavior again, we've driven in that encoding. We've driven back into the brain. We've cleared a little bit more of the pathway that we're trying not to go down. So when you take the choice to say, I am not going to do it tonight, and even in the moment, if I say, does it matter or not? My promise to you is it matters, because the next day it's going to get a little easier because now you've cleared the other path. And then the next time you choose not to do it again, you've cleared the path. That can be nighttime eating for a lot of my clients. Like, does it matter when I'm in the moment? I don't think I care. But the second that I don't nighttime eat, it's a little easier not to nighttime eat the next night. Isn't that interesting? It's a little easier not to drink the next night. It's a little easier to go to the gym the next week after I have a whole week under my belt. And that is because we are making room. We are clearing a new path of behaviors. And this goes back to Robin's question of how do we take something and start to make it feel more innate? Self-talk. Let's talk self-talk, because the more that we clear the path of talking positively to ourselves, of not judging others, of not projecting something, that our neuroplasticity, our brain is changing. We as a person are changing, and we won't go back to who we were. All of our efforts that we're putting in is promise of change, which is scary because sometimes the people that we're bringing with us on change don't want to see it because they're like, I'm losing who you were. So they like either have to like join us on our journey of change, or it can really lay down some hard relationship work, because we're changing as a person, which is interesting. And Robin, I know you have a lot of belief in this and some really cool words around it too. Where is your brain going with all of this?
Yeah. So, a couple things came to mind when you were talking. I'll start with the last thing you said. Not everyone who started with you is going to finish with you. Right? What's the old saying? The elevator goes up. The elevator to success is going up. Before you get to your top floor, you're going to need to stop on a lot of floors and let some people off. And that idea that don't ever let other people hold you back, because sometimes it's not even about you. It's, again, no judgment, just awareness. When some people are not ready to change or move or shift, and they see you doing it, they're going to try and step in and let you know, yeah, it's never going to work. They're going to be the naysayers, or they're going to create some roadblocks. And that can be really challenging. Win that battle every time. And if it's again, easier said than done sometimes, you're allowed to step away or stop the elevator and let someone off as you continue up. And that's okay. That's okay. The group on each floor might look a little different than it did on the floor below you, and that's okay. So give yourself permission to do that. The other thing, when we talk about habits and you hear, 21 days, 28 days, create a 90-day plan, I would invite and encourage you to throw all of that stuff out. It's going to take as long as it's going to take. And actually, if we don't have time here, but fascinating story how that concept of 21 days to change a habit even came in. Has nothing to do with habits. It has to do with ridiculous things that somebody twisted and put in an article. Fascinating story. It doesn't mean anything. Here's the key. Just keep doing it. Little things done consistently will always get you where you want to go. And the time's going to pass anyway. Who cares if it takes a month or 3 months or 6 months or a year? A year from now, if you could be exactly who you want to be, why would you not do it for a year, right? The time's going to pass anyway. So just go for it. Don't worry about how long it takes or doesn't take. The other thing is, it's funny because the keep going thing, the analogy I love to share is, every single one of us, when we were a baby and we started to go from crawling to pulling ourselves up, you didn't just go from crawling to walking, right? You got up and fell tons of times before you got up and walked. And we don't think about walking. Once you're walking, you don't think about it anymore, right? No baby ever fell down like 20 times and was like, forget it. I'm just crawling the rest of my life. Screw this. Babies don't have that filter of what will people think. I bet I'll never be able to do this. They don't care. They're just going to keep doing it until they do it. And that's literally all they care about. So I'll invite you to pull the filters out Nobody's thinking about you. They're too busy in their own heads thinking about what everyone's thinking of them. So nobody even knows you're in the room. Don't even worry about it. Don't worry about it took someone else a shorter time. What's wrong with me? Or why can't I do it? Just keep doing it. Think of the baby. The baby never gets in its own way. The baby just goes, whoops, I fell again. I better get up. I better get up. Oh, look, I'm walking. And you never think about it again. So think about that with anything you're looking to do. And the last thing, because the neuroplasticity, everything is muscle memory, right? Once you start creating the right muscle memories, whether it's mental muscle memories or physical, everything changes. Everything is uncomfortable when it's different. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's different. And the only way we get out of our comfort zones, the only way we can grow, the only way we can become something different than what we are now, if that's what we'd like to, in some area of our life, is to get uncomfortable, because that's the only time something's different. If it's comfortable, you're not changing anything. And if I'm doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, we all know what that gets us. It doesn't work. So think of the baby, think of the oxygen mask, think of Joan or whoever in your head and how she's lying to you constantly. You're allowed to stop listening to her, right? All of those types of things, right? Forging the new pathways. And the more you forge the other, the more you clear the other one, the more weeds grow in that old one. Think of some of these visuals that we've shared with you. And hopefully there are some things that you went, I never thought about it that way. Interesting. Because the great thing about all this stuff is you don't have to make extra time to do it. You don't have to put it on your schedule or your calendar and figure out when to do it. We're doing stuff all the time. We're interacting, we're thinking, we're making decisions. All of this stuff we're talking about, you do 24/7. So we would invite you to start to pick something, a thing or two, maybe you got today, if it would help. And just one thing, start applying it. Start doing one thing differently. Expect it to be uncomfortable and get comfortable with uncomfortable, because that means, whoa, I'm actually changing. That's pretty awesome. And I hope you got some good stuff out of today.
As Robin and I are closing out, we wanted to invite you we do LinkedIn Lives together. Like we had talked about, we're working our way through the alphabet right now. If you wanted to friend, either it's Robin Sachs on LinkedIn or Lindsay House, that you will get our little notifications when we go live. And you'll also be able to find our past episodes together. We're normally on Thursdays around 9 or 10 Central Time. I also wanted to say Robin and I's episode together, if you're like, I like Robin, on Direction, Not Perfection, we're episode 157, Get Off My Bus, which is her book and which is what drew me into her. Totally. I could listen to you all day on that one. And Robin, want to give them any last minute places to find you?
You know what? Feel free. If anything I said resonates with you, I have a lot of free articles, videos, tips, tools, things like that on my website, which is robinjsachs.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there most days. And through my website, you can get me on any social media, YouTube, stuff like that. Lots of free videos with just little tools, tips about this kind of stuff, how to be more confident, less stressed, how to be kinder to yourself, all of those types of things. And if I can ever be of value, feel free to reach out.